Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, and welcome to Prog Chattery 777, where today I'm going to be rambling incoherently about the award-winning bakery named Marconi, also known as PFM, Premiata Fornaria Marconi. Specifically, the album I'm going to be talking about is The World Became the World, which is arguably one of the silliest album titles I think I've ever heard. But that's okay, it's a fantastic album, and the music on here more than makes up for the fact that it has a silly title. So this was released in 1974. It is their second album with English lyrics, and it's essentially an English version of their third album, La Sola di Niente, which is a very, very well-respected, highly regarded album amongst prog circles, as I'm sure you know. I do not own a physical copy of that album, but one day it will be added to my collection. But this will do in the meantime. As I said, this is a fantastic, fantastic album, I think. Of all the PFM that I've heard so far, I think this one's probably my favorite. There's a lot of good energy on this album, and I think, you know, if anything, this is a transitional kind of period. You know, this album and La Sola di Niente, and that we see the band. You know, they're going for a harder sound, an edgier sound, and the result is the band sort of flirting with fusion almost. There's a lot of chops on this album. You know, a lot of displays of virtuosity and whatnot, which is great. You know, that's a prog thing, but it's also a fusion thing as well. And I think, you know, there's definitely a leaning towards fusion on some of the tracks on here. They would develop that even further as they went deeper into the 70s. But this album, I think, captures a really, really good balance between, you know, the classic early 70s prog stuff and, you know, the late 70s fusion stuff. It's kind of a perfect, you know, if you were to draw, you know, the line between prog and fusion is, you know, this album goes right on that line, I think, which is great. I said I've got no problems with that. It's the proggy stuff that it has, you know, it's got those. It has that storytelling effect. I think that's a classic PFM quality. Even though I don't really know obviously I don't know the Italian lyrics, what they mean. I don't really pay much attention to the English lyrics on here either. But you can tell there's, you know, the songs have that vibe of conveying a story. You know what I mean? So I mean, that's all there. There's still some really, really nice, you know, ethereal acoustic guitar parts. Although there's less on here than there is on the previous album, but that's fine. Like I said, I like the playing, right? And yeah, also the use of the choir on the opening track is a very, very proggy thing, and that's very unique within prog as well, I think. So that's kind of interesting. Production-wise, I think this is a big step up from the previous album that I talked about, Photos of Ghosts. Photos of Ghosts is a classic album, no doubt, but at least the version that I have, the copy that I have on vinyl, it just sounds a little dull, and it doesn't have the punch. Whereas this recording, or at least this pressing, has got lots of punch. The drums, particularly on the second side of this, are just huge, and they just, you know, you're attacked with bass drum and snare, which is exactly what I like. So production-wise, it's definitely been an up. With regards to the English lyrics, like I said, when I'm listening to the music, I'm not really paying attention to the lyrics. You know, at least with the versions of PFM that I have, I'm wishing that they were in Italian more than anything, but they still sing with their accent, so it's not necessarily easy to pick out what they're saying. And the lyrics on this album, I think, are also notable for being not very good, which is weird because it's Peter Sinfield who wrote the lyrics of King Crimson fame. And for the next albums, they did not use Peter Sinfield, which is that might be why. There's a couple of lyrical moments on here when I was, you know, reading the lyrics that are a little bit what? But particularly there's a line in the track. I'm not going to repeat it, but is my face on straight, which is just it's not a very nice. It's not a good lyric, but. Yeah, on the whole, like I said, this is a fantastic album, and it's probably my favorite of the PFM so far. Like I said, at least the albums that I've heard. Remember, I'm still a PFM newbie, so bear with me with that. There's maybe other stuff that I haven't heard yet that is far superior, but for now, this is definitely a highlight for me. There's a lineup change around this time. Before they recorded La Sola di Niente, they did add a bass player, or they replaced a bass player, rather. I'm not going to try and pronounce their names because I'd embarrass myself, and it would take me forever to make these videos because I keep restarting if I mispronounce something. I probably already have, that's the funny thing. But yeah, there's a new bass player on here, and at least when I compare it to the bassist that's on Photos of Ghosts, the guy on here is much, much busier. He plays more notes in a shorter amount of time, which may contribute to that kind of, you know, fusion inkling that I'm getting on here. But yeah, fantastic bass player, and he's got lots of great little moments on there, and yeah, it's an album filled with surprises as well. So let us try and dissect the tracks, shall we? So, side 1 opens with The Mountain. This is originally the title track for La Sola di Niente, and this is the big 10-minute epic, and it's a great track. It's kind of funny, when I was talking about the previous album, the opening track on the previous album is about 7 minutes long, but it feels like it's a 10-minute long thing. This is 10 minutes long, but it feels like it's a 7-minute thing. But there's lots of different sections to The Mountain, which makes it interesting. The most notable part is the intro, the 2 full minutes, 2+ minutes of just pure choral excellence. And that's a very unique thing. I can't think of too many other prog bands that opened an album quite like that. And there's a great contrast between that opening section with the choir and the big riff that comes in. Boom, doo, doo, boom, doo, doo, boom, doo, doo, boom, doo, doo. You really hear that heaviness factor. They're going for, you know, a heavier rock sort of a thing at this point. And that whole, like, heavy section, I guess you call it the main riff of the song, boom, doo, doo, is just great. You know, it's a slow, heavy, brooding thing, and it just starts galloping. You really hear the bass player's notes once the thing gets going. And there's some double bass drum in there as well. But the bass drums captured on here seem a little bit more muddled compared to other bass drum. Maybe it's just, you know, they're trying to perfect the, you know, miking technique for 2 basses. I'm not really too sure. But that whole section is just fantastic. And then when the vocals come in, I mean, they just soar over that riff. There's a soaring quality, which is fantastic. And then there's some kind of technical crazy bits that pop in, and then we get a nice long extended bridge. It's like a 3-part bridge, which is really, really cool. We get some of those atmospheric arpeggiated guitar lines that are very tranquil and relaxing, and then that kind of works its way into like a keyboard fugue, a synthesizer fugue, which is cool, and very different from, you know, the way ELP would do something like that. It's not as showy or flashy, but it's very musical, almost like a cross between Gentle Giant and ELP, I would say. And then after we get the little fugue, the whole band comes in for a big wind-up, and it leads us back into the choir. And from the choir we get that big heavy riff again, and then the atmospheric arpeggios kind of lead the song to a nice atmospheric ending. So it's a great epic, a multi-part crazy thing, and it feels a lot shorter than 10 minutes, like I said. But great opener to the album, and certainly a great title track for the original Italian version. Now we move on to track 2 of side 1, and we get Just Look Away. This was originally on side 2 of the original Italian album, I believe. And very, very tranquil. It works as a great juxtaposition to the big heaviness of the first track. I get a Genesis vibe with this, you know, kind of like a For Absent Friends or something like that, but a little more expanded upon. I really like the jazzy keyboard intro too. There's just a quick couple of bars, dun, 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 and then the acoustic guitars come in, and yeah, it's a nice, simple, placid little track, which is quite nice and very delicate. And towards the end, the full band kind of, you know, picks it up a little bit, but still remains nice and peaceful. And yeah, it's a nice track. It's a great contrast to pretty much everything else on the album, actually, when you think about it. Because you know, there's a lot of full-blown heavy stuff on here. But yeah, Just Look Away. It might be my least favorite on the record, but it's a really good record, so that means it's still a very good track. We'll move on. We'll move on to track 3 specifically, which is the title track, "The World Became the World." Just a silly title, I must say. But this might be my favorite PFM track, actually. This is the one that wasn't originally on La Sola di Niente. This was on the original album, and the original title was Impressioni di Settembre. There's a mispronunciation for you right there. But if I do have a favorite PFM track so far, this might be it. It's almost like their anthem. You know, that main theme that comes in about the halfway mark with the keyboards. But it's more like it's got the keyboard sound, the Moog thing. It's so good. It's a perfect theme, and you know they throw a few different variations of it as it goes along, and it's just so well done. To me, it's the closest thing to a perfect track. I mentioned, I think, the intro video that PFM has. That's almost like a definitive prog band. Well, The World Became the World, or Impressione di September, is almost like the definitive prog song. I mean, if you were to ask, if someone were to ask me, oh, what does 70s prog sound like? It's kind of a ridiculous question because there's so many different sounds to the genre or whatever it is. There's just something about The World Became the World and the proper Italian counterpart that it's almost like the definitive classic 70s prog song. It has everything. You know, there's a great juxtaposition between the intro and like I said, the big stately theme, but even the quiet intro with those, you know, gentle guitars and whatnot. There's an anthemic quality to the melody that's sung, which is really good. It's a very anthemic song in general, but I just really love that theme, and I think it's really well played. It's grand, it's anthemic, it is PFM. Great track. A contender for my favorite on the album, actually. It might be the song with my least favorite title might be my favorite song on the album, funnily enough. It's just great. Anyway, we'll flip the record over now so you can see the very plain back cover. It's a nice cover, actually. I quite like the cover. And we get to side 2, which opens with 4 Holes in the Ground. Oh, I had it written down, the original title, but it's escaping me right now, and I don't have my paper with me. Now this is a great track, 4 Holes in the Ground. Now this is what I was talking about with like almost a perfect blend of the classic 70s prog thing with fusion. It's almost like Jethro Tull meets fusion to a certain extent. I mean, that might be because of the flute that I'm thinking of, but that main melody at the start, it does have, you know, a Tullian vibe, or at least it's a classically influenced melody, but it's played with, you know, a gusto and bravado and, you know, with chops that make it fusiony. It's basically, you know, classical meets jazz fusion, which is fantastic, and it's, you know, that's a very proggy thing to do, and I can't think of too many other examples that really achieve that. But this is another contender for favorite song on the album, actually. There's so many great parts to it, particularly the moment where they have that big theme, and it starts out slow and then it speeds up and it speeds up, and it just, you know, it's one of those musical mind-blowing moments. And the intro is so long winding, and there's so many, you know, it navigates its way through so many different variations of the melodies and whatnot, and it's one of those things where, you know, you're already so engaged with the music, and it's already, you know, puts you up to such a high level, and then by the time that dun da 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 da, when that kicks in, it just kicks it up even higher. It goes right through the roof, and it's musical ecstasy. Really, really good stuff. And then of course there's a song portion just, you know, tucked away in the middle there. The first verse is very slow and grand, and yeah, there's no better way to describe it. And then it kind of turns into a real fast-paced, kind of a shuffly thing with all kinds of cool shots and, you know, little melodic figures that pop in and out, and winds its way back to those opening melodies, and it's a fantastic, fantastic track. Like I said, it's fusion meets classical. The melodies to me are very, you know, old world classical kind of stuff, but it's played with that fusion, the fusion style, those chops, that hyper energy. It's just fantastic stuff. Really good song. And a contender for a favorite. We move on to track 5, track 2 of side 4, or track 2 of side 2. My apologies. The track is My Face on Straight. Now this is an interesting one, actually, because the original La Sola di Niente album featured one track with English lyrics, and this is that track. So unlike Photos of Ghosts, where they did keep one Italian track, they did keep one track and keep it exactly the same for the English release, they did the same thing here, but they already sung in English on their original Italian release, so that's kind of interesting. And this is the track where the lyrics are quite... at one point, anyway, towards the middle, The music is fine. The music is great actually. It's starts out with those kind of arpeggiated guitars, much faster though actually, and it works its way into a kind of a it's is it poppy? I don't know. I wouldn't say it's poppy, but it's definitely it's one of the more accessible PFM tracks, I would say, if it weren't for the funny lyrics. Thank goodness for the accents. You can't really understand what they're saying. The worst part about the bad lyric is that it comes right when the music kind of fades out towards the middle and it kind of slows down and the singer's right there in your face. And like I said, if I didn't actually read the lyrics, I'd had no idea what he actually says there. But yeah, it's quite strange. But anyway, the lyrics are secondary to me. It's the music it's all about the music, man. But yeah, it's a great track. My favorite bit on is my face on straight is actually the end, where it all kind of slows down and it almost goes into like a Beatles-esque sort of thing, or if not Supertramp-ish, and we get that kind of boom, with the kind of honky-tonk piano, but it's all about the accordion. The accordion solo over that is just, the guy's just shredding on the accordion. I love that. I love hearing a nice diversity of soloing instruments, and having an accordion up there doing some fantastic work is always welcome in my ears. But I really like the outro, funnily enough. I think the outro is kind of the highlight of the song, personally. That might be controversial, but there you go. Anyway, moving on to the final track of the album, track 3 of side 2, track 6 overall, we have Your Cake and Beat It, which is an instrumental, and it's funny that they gave it an English title, even though there's no lyrics on the whole thing. I think the Italian title is way cooler, Via Lumiere. That's just as cool a title for an instrumental. You don't need to title the instrumental English. But again, words are not important. This is a phenomenal instrumental. And again, I mean, okay, I'll be fair. There's 3 favorites. Of the 6 tracks on here, I've got 3 favorites on the album, and Have Your Cake and Beat It is certainly one of them. It is just fantastic. Opening with the bass solo, we really get to hear that new bass player's chops, and we hear that fusiony, funky style. He's very, very busy, but he can also play. He's obviously very musically educated as well. So I mean, obviously someone with chops is musically educated, but he's a wise bass player. I mean, he knows how to play some of the classical things or the jazz things that they're playing, but he can also just groove out like a maniac. But that whole bass intro is really, really cool. But it's all about that big riff that kicks in, that funky riff. So very good, and you really hear the fusion on that track. But and the way it builds up, and it turns into a big frenzy, and the violin is just going ape, which is great. Parts of it with that riff, when that riff is chugging away and the bass player is playing a million notes a minute and the violin is just screeching over top of everything, it almost reminds me of some of the 70s era King Crimson, John Wetton era King Crimson. Much funkier than the Crim though. It definitely has a funkier edge, I think. It's unfair that I keep comparing them to all these bands, but it's an easy cop-out way to talk about stuff, I guess. But yeah, I got a little bit of a Crimson vibe with some of those sections, but the song is very long-winded and it goes through all kinds of really cool little changes. There's lots of great dynamics and there's so many good themes to it, and particularly like the closing theme is very grand, and it's there is no other place to put that song other than at the end of the album. So what can be said? It's fantastic, really, really good instrumental, and it's like I said, it's my third of 3 favorite tracks of the 6 on the album. So World Became the World, 4 Holes in the Ground, and Have Your Cake and Beat It are all absolutely classic, and The Mountain is very, very good too, and the other ones are good. But point is, it's a fantastic album, and if you are into prog rock, you should definitely check it out. Or if you're into fusion, you should check it out. If you like fusion but you're not really into the prog thing, maybe this is the thing that might make that transition for you. If you're into prog but you don't like fusion, maybe this will make that transition for you. So it's a great album. Like I said, it's like riding that line. It's right on the line between those 2 styles or attitudes or genres or whatever the heck a music thing is. It rides that line between prog and fusion. And with that, I'll wrap this video up. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all the rest of it. And stay tuned for my next PFM chat, which will be Chocolate Kings. I know I said in my first video that I didn't have it, but it turns out I do. And I've been listening to it a little bit, and I'm going to do myself a little chat about that. So Chocolate Kings is next. Until the future, you'll see me then. Bye-bye.